All right, so we left off last time. Um, we created a little bit of logic to check whether or not our player name was longer than 0. And if it is, then we pass in the value. But if that value is less than 0, that's what our else here is. We're just going to throw a new exception letting the person know they need to enter this. We also need to include a couple of access modifiers. And what that does is that allows other classes to access these individual elements, for example, or these properties. Right now, um, if you've done coding in the past, you're probably cringing at the idea of like, wait a second, where is, like anybody can kind of come in and just sort of edit these. So what I normally do is I mark this as private, and I make the um, property that I want to be able to be edited public. And so by doing this, I need to give special access to this property here, which, as you already know, is the property that gets changed or the value gets stored in, and then it gets updated with my player character's name. So now you might be wondering, okay, we made this, but how do I test this to see if it actually works? Well, what we're going to do is create something called a constructor. So if you click the little minus sign at the highest level of your property setup here, you can compress it so it looks like one line. Don't be afraid. If you click it again, you can expand it. I'm going to move this player character ability string. Actually, I'm just going to delete it altogether. I want to keep these videos pretty light. Um, so what you normally want to do is below any sort of properties and at the top of any functions or methods, we haven't written any functions or methods yet, you want to create your constructor. Okay, so what we're going to do is type CTOR and hit the tab key twice, and that'll create your constructor. Now notice a couple things here. Our constructor is the same name as our class. And what this indicates to our class is that anything we put inside of here will run automatically. That means when this class is called, it'll run the code in here. So you don't necessarily have to call this constructor. It's automatically called when the class is called. And we'll get into a little bit of what calling means, but for now, just understand that a constructor is the first thing that your compiler looks at when it accesses this class. So let's say that our character here um, starts off with the name Mario. It's just sort of a default thing, but later we'll let our players change the name. Well, remember that this is the value that gets updated as it's passed into this property here. And constructors are used for initialization, right? So you could set player health, things like that. That's what I would normally do in the constructor at the very get-go. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and just say, grab my player character name here, and then paste it. So I'm going to copy that, Control C, and then Control V it here, and just make it equal to the string exo. All right, so let's take a look at methods. Um, one of the things or the attributes that our player character might have is, let's say, health. So a method is essentially used to manipulate data, and they also have access modifiers, just like our properties do. So let's go ahead and type that out. So public, let's make it a float. This is a return type float, which means we're going to have a return statement in here, and I'll show you that in a second. And we'll just name this player health. Now, say we want to pass in the value of whatever our current health is in from whatever character is accessing this script. So say we have a multiplayer game with a bunch of player healths and we want this to really just do printing of player health. So we could just even name that print player health. So in here, I'm just going to make this I'm going to pass in a float variable here. And I'm going to call it p health. And then what I'm going to do here, I'm surprised I'm not getting the squiggly lines here because I'm not returning anything, is I'm just going to say return player health. So what'll happen here is every time this method is called from another class, we're going to pass in a player health here and then return that. So the last thing I want to cover is something that's a fairly new way of coding methods here, and it's called a method body expression or a function bodied expression. So the way that works is you write public, same access modifier, same data value that's going to be returned, same name, right? We're going to have to comment this out because it's becoming the same, it's really the same method just written in a new way. The same parameter you're planning on passing in here, but what's essentially different is there's no longer a return statement. What you do is you write an arrow to whatever it is that you're returning. So for us, we're returning the public health variable that's being passed in here, and then we write a semicolon. So this is essentially the equivalent of this right here. So I can comment this out, and then what we'll do in the next video is take a look at calling this method so you could see it work. And we'll create another method in the traditional way so you can see how both of those work.